Joining us now to provide a review of the past elections is Terry Tselane, Deputy Chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission. Terry, good morning. Lovely to have you on the show. And of course, congratulations to yet another successful election here in South Africa. But let's start by looking at some of the indicators that you would use to measure yourself. And voter registration should certainly be one of those. 73% this year. This is compared to 79% in the 2009 elections. Give us a little bit of insight into those numbers and whether that's a trend that we should be worried about.
Well, I don't think we should actually be worried about this because if you look at the number, the total number of people who had actually registered by the time we went to last elections, we had about 23 million South Africans registered, and we managed to increase the number this time around with about 2 more million. So we had, going into this election, 25.4 million people registered. So yes, 79, you would think that moving from 79 to 73, it's actually a decline, but in real terms, it is not really such a big decline.
Terry, looking at whose responsibility it is to register voters, I mean, you can't make people vote, although in Australia they try to. Voting is compulsory in Australia. But do you see, is it your responsibility to register people in the sense of encouraging them to register, or are you merely the mechanism? So in other words, is it like a political imperative to get people to register, say government or the political parties must do that, or do you see it as your job to raise the registration level?
I think it's a joint responsibility. It's a joint responsibility between ourselves as the Electoral Commission, together with the political parties. We always emphasize this when we're having conversations with the political parties, that they've got to inspire people to be able to go to register. Because at the end of the day, people who will be voting for the political parties are those people who are registered. If you are not registered, you will not actually be able to vote. So it is their responsibility. But it is our responsibility as well, because our responsibility is to make sure that we've got a voters' roll that is credible. And the only way that we can be able to have a voters' roll that is credible is by ensuring that we have people in that voters' roll, and those people are registered where they are ordinarily resident.
Terry, the IEC pulled out all the stops in this election when it comes to trying to entice young people, and in particular the born-frees, to come to the voting polls. We saw a massive social media campaign that we'd never seen before. We saw celebrities stepping up to the platform on the back of the IEC. Once the election has now taken place, do you feel that you've got the traction that you intended to have with all the investment that you made into getting young people to the polls?
Look, I mean, it was a good start. It was a good start, but I think there's still a lot of work that needs to go into this. I think social media has basically transformed the way elections are run, and I think it's going to be important for us to take stock of what has actually happened during this past elections going forward, to make sure that we are able to respond as quickly as possible. I think even though we're very, very strong in the area of social media, as well as in terms of getting applications out there that people could use for these elections, there is a lot of improvement that we can put into this. And I think going forward we're going to be doing this. But I think also it's in relation to media. I think media as well has got a responsibility in relation to having to respond to the social media, because you find a situation where your mainstream media was completely confused in terms of its role. They were taking things that are on social media, particularly on Twitter, as though they are fact. There was no investigation, and therefore those rumors that are actually put on social media were put as though they are fact.
Well, but that's an interesting one, and we're seeing it with the Oscar Pistorius trial as well.
Precisely.
Discussion of how the court is influencing social media, and the social media is influencing witnesses, and you get all these stories going around that haven't been verified. And for us, the media, you know, you can't just report things that are out there. But there were reports, and I heard people phoning into radio stations on the day, and that there was Alexandra Township, a near riot or an actual riot, protests about apparently ballot boxes being found full of papers. What incidents were true, and what were the most serious ones that you experienced?
Let me deal with that incident of Alexandra, because I think there's a major misunderstanding of what actually happened there. When people vote, the voting station is turned into after voting, it is turned into a counting station. So the ballot papers do not leave the area where voting has actually taken place. Now, immediately after counting, you've got to get what you call the result slip. That result slip you've got to reconcile everything and be able to put all the results in that result slip. One result slip you've got to take to the municipality, one you've got to put into a ballot box with the ballot papers. And then you take that information to a warehouse for storage. Now what happened in Alexander is that voting was done, counting was done, the results already declared, and the people who were working there decided they were going to fetch this ballot papers the following day because they thought everything had actually been completed and there was no problem with them leaving those ballot papers there to fetch them the following day. We've got the result slips indicating that results are accounted for all the voting stations. But now someone came to the voting stations and saw these ballot papers and decided to distribute them wherever they distributed them. And that created an impression that, in fact, those ballot papers were not counted.
So how do we make sure that incidents of that particular nature don't occur as we head up to 2019?
We're definitely going to have to increase our training programs and to intensify it, to make sure that we do not have those kind of problems. But I think it is important as well that we take stock in terms of who actually left their ballot papers in their stations, such as those in Alexander. And we've got to either make sure that those people are not part of our organization again going forward, or making sure that that kind of a problem is not experienced again.
There were other little things that got reported. Now, one mustn't make them too big, but on the other hand, for those people, they were big things. On one of the radio stations, a woman phoned in, she said she was with her 2-year-old baby, and they wouldn't let her into the polling station because children weren't allowed. Then we heard someone phone from another one saying, no, the kids went in, but they just weren't allowed to actually go in the classroom. And she asked someone to hold the baby, so it was okay. So I'm mentioning that example as a way of saying, you've got thousands of people around the country. Must be very difficult to get consistent application of behavior throughout. How do you get them all to do what you want them to do?
You know, it's one of the challenges. Because, sorry, on the day of the elections, we've got about 218,000 people deployed. These people are people that you basically have as an organization just for under 10 days. You've got to train them, you've got to deploy them, you've got to make sure that they give you the results within 10 days. Sometimes you don't even understand their work ethic, you don't understand whether they understand the rules and regulations, they don't understand even the law itself. Because electoral legislation, it's also a very complex legislation.
But how do you train all these people in 10 days?
Yeah, we've got an arrangement where we take them through thorough training, intense training, trying to make sure that they actually understand. Now, the incident that we actually talked about of a person not being allowed at the voting station, it was not even the presiding officer, it was a police officer. And you know, I was very, very angry actually when I was told about this. And I intervened, I spoke to the police officer there and I said, you know that in fact you are not supposed to be playing any role whatsoever. You are not supposed to tell who is eligible and who is not. As a police officer, you only deal with issues that relates to security. You know, so, but eventually that person was allowed to vote. I spoke to the presiding officer. But you will have those kind of small incidents. But even when you think about those, you always have got to think about the fact that you are dealing with 25.4 million registered voters. You are dealing with 22,263 voting stations. You are dealing with 218,000 staff members. So it is the context within which you must always look at the election and the election process.